Okay.
Let me take you back, all the way to a little arcade game that hit the scene in 1981 named Donkey Kong. This simple game was the launching point for two of Nintendo's biggest icons 30 years later, Jumpman, Mario, and of course Donkey Kong. It may seem crazy to think about since Mario is the poster boy for Nintendo nowadays, but upon release, Donkey Kong was the one that everyone remembered. I mean, the game itself was named after him, and even the sequels that came after, he was still the King Kong. Oh wait, I can't say that. Alright. But alas, soon after Mario took the spotlight with a series of his own, Donkey Kong started to fade into obscurity. After his 3 arcade hits, the only thing of substance we ever received was an educational game for the NES and a few cameos in Mario games. This gave off the impression that Nintendo kinda forgot about the Big Ape. Donkey Kong's legacy at this point was bound to forever be tied to the arcades of the 80s. But then, he was reborn. Donkey Kong was transformed into a full-fledged series thanks to the works of many different developers throughout the generations, but mostly rare. DK went from an angry pet who stole your girl to somewhat of a hero, with his own world full of friends and enemies. It turned out that, oddly enough, a video game series about a bunch of apes and chimps became one of the most charming and beloved Nintendo series. It doesn't hurt when you have amazing main title games and fun, creative spin-offs under your belt, but while the gameplay is a crucial part of why Donkey Kong is one of my favorite series of all time, there's just something about his cast that's so enduring, more specifically the DK crew. The DK crew is comprised of friends and family members surrounding Donkey Kong that help out in his endless battles for bananas against the Kremlings, penguins, and tikis. Each member has their own personality and usage for the Kong crew spread out upon many games. But which Kong is the best of the best? It should be obvious by the title, but only members of the DK crew can make the list, so no Kremlings or other somewhat forgettable villains. Also no Lanky Kong. He's a traitor to the DK crew and just, he's seen some stuff, man.
Hey!
The wife of Cranky and grandmother to Donkey Kong, everyone's not-so-favorite ape grandmama Wrinkly Kong. There are only about 13 possible candidates for this list, so a few Kongs had to get left behind. That being said, since Wrinkly did technically make the list, that does not mean she's all that helpful. Well, it's complicated. In her first appearance in DKC2, she served perhaps the most crucial role out of any Kong. She operates the Kong College, where she gives gameplay advice, but more importantly, the ability to save your progress. The problem is, you have to pay 2 coins every time you want to save your game. Okay, actually, never mind, she's generous enough to give you 1 free save for every new college you visit. You know, I get it, I guess colleges are expensive to run, but we are on a death-defying quest to save your own grandson. Could you be a little less greedy? You know, speaking about her college, it is kinda suspicious looking. I have my doubts that Wrinkly is actually certified for this. Also, apparently she has taught the Kremlings along with K. Rool himself. Aside from giving the Kong's mortal enemies an education, it's good that she supports diversity of both Kongs and Crocs. So why is Wrinkly even on the list if I have hardly anything good to say about her? In the early stages, Wrinkly did not make the cut, until I realized just how dedicated she was to the Kong family. See, after the events of DKC3, Wrinkly just straight up dies. But in DK64, she still hangs around as a ghost to give you golden banana hints. Instead of moving on to the monkey afterlife, she sticks around to give you help. If that isn't dedication, I don't know what is. Which it's pretty messed up if you think that her husband Cranky Kong, who judging by appearances was roughly the same age as her, is still alive to this day. I feel as though I might be one of the only people to show any ounce of enjoyment for Kiddy Kong. Anytime DKC3 is ever brought up in whatever discussion imaginable, somebody always has to say, Kiddy sucks. I am here to say that he's alright. By no means is Kiddy my favorite of the crew, but man, he definitely gets trashed on way too much. I suspect the hate comes from either one of two places. Firstly, his design. As his name applies, Kiddy is the youngest Kong of the bunch, sporting a pacifier and a onesie that is a tad bit too big for him. For what Rare was going for, I actually find Kiddy's appearance charming and a little adorable, especially some of his animations and chubby cheeks. The second reason, and possibly the more prevalent of the two, is DKC3's team composition. Since somehow both Donkey and Diddy got kidnapped by the Kremlings, it is up to Dixie and her cousin Kiddy to rescue them. I feel as though this automatically put Kiddy in an unfavorable position due to not having access to play as Donkey, you know, the main character of the franchise, or the fan favorite Diddy. Dixie and Kiddy just don't mesh as well as the iconic buddy duo of Donkey and Diddy from DKC1 or the incredibly fluid team of Diddy and Dixie from DKC2. In Kiddy's defense, however, I feel as though the absence of a playable Donkey and Diddy was necessary to truly give Dixie a starring role of her own, which she totally deserved. If the powerhouses Donkey and Diddy were playable, Dixie would have fell into their shadow just a wee bit. Kiddy, unfortunately, is just a byproduct of this, at least from my point of view. But enough of that tangent. Why else is Kiddy deserving of a small smidge of love? Kiddy actually has some unique talents of his own. He can bounce repeatedly off of water. Yeah, don't ask me how he does that, and honestly, it wasn't all that useful in the actual game, but he can do it! Although, the moment I knew that Kiddy was not the abomination that people made him out to be was when I was playing DKC3 for the first time and died. Kiddy lets out this enormous cry that completely caught me off guard, and it's the best thing about this character. In terms of overall usage in the franchise, Swanky Kong is rather obscure, which is a shame since he's one of the flashiest and most entertaining Kongs in the crew. Game shows in real life have always interested me, so his role as a game show host in DKC2 hits home. In his game show Swanky's Bonus Bonanza, you play a trivia game with the questions difficulty ranging from how many banana coins you are willing to put up. The questions are centered mostly around what area you are when you enter his game show, with some questions about different helper Kongs thrown in to make sure you are paying attention. While it is fun to participate in Swanky's Bonus Bonanza, the prize is rather lackluster. For the SNES version at least, the most you can win is 6 extra lives per Swanky space. This isn't the most practical way to gain extra lives, and once you complete his game show once, you can't replay it for more lives. The trivia is fun to go through on your first playthrough, but the questions are the same every file, so it really just ends up being something you tend to skip over, especially if you're low on banana coins.
Ready?
In his next and last main appearance, DKC3, he ditched the game show and ran a circus tent named Swanky's Sideshow. Instead of trivia questions to answer, you face off against Cranky Kong in a hit the target with a ball game. There are a small handful of modes to this, but it gets kind of repetitive extremely quickly due to its simplicity. And yet again, his prizes for winning are not worth the trouble, just a few banana bunches and some bear coins. At least his Bonus Bonanza is fun to go through every new Swanky location as you progress through the game, since there's always new questions to be answered. His sideshow, however, is just the same thing every single time, and it just ends up being a boring mess. I'd like to imagine that Swanky isn't actually affiliated with the Kong family in any way, but rather just shows up to make some quick cash. A true entrepreneur. In fact, you can tell this is true if you look at his appearance from DKC2 to 3. He went from wearing an oversized blue jacket to looking quite lavish with much better posture. There is one huge flaw with Swanky though. He's Donkey Kong but with an afro.
I don't have time for small fry!
Without a doubt, Funky Kong has stayed true to his name the most out of anyone else in the Kong crew. From his first appearance in DKC1 all the way to the most recent entry Tropical Freeze, Funky has always preserved his hype attitude throughout every iteration. I mean, what's funkier than a bandana and a pair of shades, eh? For such a fan favorite, Funky ranks so low because of his signature modern day appearance of a plain white tank top and ripped jean shorts. This design in itself is not bad, especially since he found the decency to put some clothes on, but something about his chain in the first 2 country games really gives him a more funky persona. Speaking of appearances, Funky is one of the few Kongs to be in almost every mainline Donkey Kong platformer in some form. His longevity is a clear sign of his place in the fandom. Funky is just the bro of the group that everyone wants to hang around. But don't be fooled by his carefree attitude, because Funky may as well be one of the most intelligent in the entire crew. In DKC1, Funky has somehow been able to combine aircraft dynamic technology into a single regular sized barrel that allows you to travel across DK Island. No, it does not stop there. While offering the same services in DKC2, Funky has figured out how to surf the air itself. Perhaps a form of levitation. This begs the question, what other secrets does Funky withhold to himself? He also sells firearms to children, by the way. The snarky, old, but also lovable Cranky Kong. Cranky Kong is pretty old. His origins start back all the way to 1981's arcade classic Donkey Kong. It can be confusing at first, but Cranky was actually the original Donkey Kong who stole Pauline from Mario all those years ago. He was only nicknamed Cranky when he got old, bitter, and cranky. In his retirement, Cranky is often seen taking a more relaxing backseat role, giving advice to Donkey and pals, but not before letting them know that their generation has it easy and games in his youth were much harder. Aside from the obvious breaking the fourth wall jokes, this feels like a natural thing an old person, or Kong, would complain about, since games at the time, and especially with the release of Donkey Kong Country, were expanding in depth. But nope, none of these fancy graphics holds a candle to the golden age of gaming during his prime. Cranky isn't all talk, because he is infamous for supposedly beating DKC1 with 1 life in under an hour, and is on top of the all-time greats list in DKC3. Sadly, however, with the tragic death of his wife Wrinkly Kong, Cranky slowly started to go insane. He tried to distract himself by picking up karate and opening up his own dojo as a hobby. Things were looking up, but that went south fast when Cranky was accused of child Kong abuse. His dojo was shut down and Cranky was on the run. He found refuge in a huge barrel and spent the rest of his days as a scientist trying to figure out the key for resurrection for his dear late wife Wrinkly. He used Donkey and his friends as test subjects for his experiments, but alas, never found a correct formula. In Tropical Freeze, Cranky is finally playable in a traditional DK platformer. He can bounce on his cane and shoot out his dentures. How, fitting.
Walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells, grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Oh yeah, walnuts.
Super Donkey Kong 2!
For the most part, every member of the DK crew has their own purpose, but one Kong that still puzzles me to this day is DK Jr. Jr. at first served a fairly straightforward purpose. He is the son of Donkey Kong, or rather Cranky Kong, and starred in the sequel to Donkey Kong, named no other than Donkey Kong Jr. Years later, Jr. even got invited to go go-karting with Mario and company, so it seems like Jr. was Nintendo's go-to Donkey Kong character for any affiliation with Mario spin-offs. The issue arises in Rare's rebooting of the series with Donkey Kong Country, where Jr. got axed for the new character Diddy Kong. But in the lore of DKC, it suggests that Jr. is actually modern-day Donkey Kong's dad. Okay, everything is still intact, but not for long. Mario Tennis came along and shattered the confounds of the DK lore. In the game, both modern-day Donkey Kong and Jr. are playable, with no signs of Jr. aging whatsoever. What could this mean? Also, Jr. is really ugly.
Which Pokemon is coming out?
He may move slow, he can't jump high, but this Kong's one hell. The old saying, don't judge a book by its cover, holds especially true with Chunky Kong. At first glance, you may mistake Chunky as just the brute force Kong of the crew, and while that is somewhat true, there is an entirely different side to Chunky that gives birth to his personality, his cowardliness. Chunky seems to dislike and avoid any kind of confrontation with enemies unless he absolutely has to participate. He does not even want to be selected when you hover over him in the tag barrel, shrugging it off and trying to get you to pick Tiny Kong over himself. While everyone else shows disappointment when not chosen, Chunky does a sigh of relief. Even his instrument of choice, the triangle, is gentle and calming compared to the others. For crying out loud, one of his special moves is to turn invisible. Well, his clothes are still there. Yeah, I don't know how effective that is. Obviously, Chunky's biggest strength, well, is his strength. His upper body is massive, giving him incredible power. He's the only one that can pick up large boulders with relative ease. However, his lower body I cannot say the same about. Having tiny legs, Chunky can't really run fast or jump high. Yes, the opening rap did not lie. Which is to be expected from him since he is the heavyweight type of character. I have an odd soft spot for really massive and strong characters who are actually wimps deep down, and Chunky fits that description perfectly. The best thing about Chunky is definitely his animations in Donkey Kong 64. His dash attack is just aggressively T-posing. His mid-air attack, he just turns into a ball and flies through the air, and his long jump is just him awkwardly throwing himself in any given direction. He also has a tiny red hat. It is actually hilarious that such a massive ape is just casually wearing such a tiny hat. You have to appreciate the little things in life.
Whoa!
Dixie Kong is one of the few female members of the DK crew, but unlike Candy and Wrinkly Kong, Dixie refuses to settle as a side support character, and is always in the action at all times. Don't let the fact that her and Diddy being in a relationship blind you from how capable she is as a hero herself. In DKC 2, after Donkey Kong was captured by the Kremlings, Dixie showed no hesitation to join Diddy on their perilous adventure to save their friend. She even had to save the day herself in DKC 3 when both Donkey and Diddy got captured. What I enjoy most about Dixie's character is her design. Along with her iconic pink beret, Dixie Kong is the perfect example of how you can make a character's design cross over with their in-game abilities, mainly with her signature ponytail. Her main attribute is the ability to glide through the air and slowly descend. Also, she can attack enemies and pick up stuff with her ponytail. Concerning her appearances in the original trilogy, I noticed she is a tiny bit slower than Diddy Kong in DKC 2, but that is a fair trade-off for having an extra ability that Diddy does not have, and overall they have a fluid dynamic between them. In DKC 1, aside from taking down larger enemies, I always want to play as Diddy, since he is much more nimble, quick, and has a tinier hurtbox compared to Donkey Kong. With the absence of a heavy-esque type character in the sequel, both characters saw a fair share of usage. In particular, Dixie is good for tight platforming and just floating across large lines of enemies. Unfortunately, she got booted out of the Kong's Jump to 3D and Donkey Kong 64, where instead of having Dixie Kong playable, we got her younger sister Tiny. By no means do I dislike Tiny, but Dixie is better in pretty much every way, so spoilers, Tiny isn't making top 3. Luckily, however, Dixie got back into the groove of things in a handful of Donkey Kong and Mario spin-off games, but truly came back into full swing with Tropical Freeze. Except now her slow descent glide is more of a small pickup boost. Also, she can do this. Overall, Dixie is just a cool gal. And if you need more convincing, then just know that she knows how to shred the guitar. This Kong needs absolutely no introduction. Donkey Kong, the main star of the entire franchise, has been around since the very beginning. Well, no, that was Cranky. So I suppose the Donkey Kong that we know today as Donkey Kong wasn't introduced until Donkey Kong Country, which was released an entire 13 years after the original arcade Donkey Kong. Even getting a late start to the franchise, the modern day Donkey Kong has been around in his days. He's been go-karting, partying, playing various sports, took up boxing, went to the Olympics multiple times, fought against literal gods and goddesses, and even dabbled into his grandfather's mischievous behavior. Donkey is not out to rescue his princess from an evil Koopa King or save the entire world from destruction. He just wants to live a simple, carefree life with his friends while building the world's largest banana horde. Like, geez, I think you have enough there, bud. But alas, an ape's life can never be that simple. Donkey Kong and company are in a never-ending battle against the Kremlings for all those bananas. Seriously, I think there is clearly enough for everyone to share, but DK can never catch a break. After his first game, he would be seen getting captured by the Kremlings twice in a row, and as a result not be playable on a home console until DK64 5 years later. Unlike his savage grandfather Cranky, Donkey Kong has the decency to put some clothes on, even if it's only a tie, but that simplicity makes his design so iconic. Since Donkey Kong is comparable to Mario or the typical average starter character, he often has average jump height and speed compared to the other Kongs of whichever game he's actually playable in. Donkey does have a variety of abilities across his many adventures that the other Kongs do not possess, such as slapping the ground really hard and pulling levers. Style, grace, funny faces, the ever so silly orangutan Lanky Kong. Lanky is the most visually distinct Kong of the bunch and also seemingly the most laid back and chill. Supposedly he's from a faraway land and he left his home to find a group of Kongs that fit his lifestyle a little more. He makes up for his tiny legs by his main characteristic, his incredibly long and stretchy arms. Much like Dixie's ponytail, Lanky does just about everything with his arms. He attacks enemies, swings in midair, and pulls out his classic handstand when he needs to. He can even fly. Well, not with his hands, but rather inflating himself like a balloon. The different sounds he makes while doing things fits alongside his quirky personality. The real shame is that he only gets a starring role in Donkey Kong 64, and outside of that he's only been regulated to a few cameos and an awful racing game. If there is any character on this list that is due for some kind of comeback, it is for sure Lanky Kong. I am not too sure the likelihood of getting another 3D Donkey Kong game anytime soon, but even so, Lanky could transfer to the 2D styled country games and still keep his main characteristic intact, his stretchiness. With Funky and Dixie coming back for a tropical freeze, let's hope even more crew members can return in the next installment, especially this crazy Kong. Donkey Kong's right-hand man, the one, the only Diddy Kong. Originally, Diddy was conceived as a redesign of DK Jr., but Nintendo saw it and said it looked too different, and they could either make this new design an entirely different character, or keep Jr.'s existing look. And you can see what they went with, and thank goodness because Jr. is some garbage. Take every characteristic of Donkey Kong and reverse it to get Diddy. He is small and weak, but he's much more quick and nimble than his big buddy and mentor. In the events of DKC1, Donkey saw a great deal of potential in Diddy, and so he started to train him to become a proud hero himself.
One stormy night, Donkey assigned Diddy to keep watch over their banana horde.
But Diddy was surprisingly ambushed and janked by the Kremlings and trapped inside a barrel. With Donkey's help, he struck revenge by defeating K. Rool and his Kremling army, securing their literal thousands of bananas back. The training did pay off, since in their next adventure it was up to Diddy, with the help of Dixie Kong, to save Donkey from the clutches of the Kremlings. Just from these first two adventures alone, Diddy secured himself as a video game legend and a staple of the Donkey Kong series, only being beaten out by Donkey Kong himself in terms of prevalence. His popularity can be attested by the fact he's the only other Kong to be included in Smash Bros., and along with Donkey, constantly appears in just about every multiplayer Mario spin-off title. He even got his own racing game with no trace of any other Donkey Kong character tagging along, which by the way is the best kart racer of all time, but I digress. What about Diddy makes him my favorite out of the entire Kong crew? He's not only the perfect sidekick character, but works just as well as the main hero of his own games. He wields dual peanut-busting pistols, he has his own jetpack, and even a hat that says Nintendo on it. Hold up, wait a minute. So does that mean in the DK universe they have Nintendo consoles in which their own games appear on? Diddy's a charming little rascal that to me is synonymous with Donkey Kong as a series, and I don't think that will change anytime soon.